Welcome to Have a Kind Word with Yourself, a podcast that helps us to keep kind, creative, and connected. My name is Rose Kondo, and I'm your host. I'm a poet, a performer, a regular doodler, and I love connecting with creative communities. In this episode, I chat with a brilliant young poet about kindness and how, at the most fundamental level, it doesn't take much to be kind. A quick note that we do touch on bereavement in our chat, and we discuss a bit about honor-based violence, so please take care when listening. Before we start, can you think of an encounter with someone else that surprised you in a good way? I remember being in a taxi a few years ago, and I was chatting with the driver, and he asked what I do for my job, and I mentioned that I'm a poet. And he found this really surprising, and he asked me to share one of my poems with him there in the taxi. And it was this lovely and very unexpected moment of connection. It's nice to be alive to those and observe them in our days. Okay, let's get today's kind words rolling. My guest today is Zara Sehar. Zara is a Muslim British-Pakistani poet who was born and raised in Halifax, West Yorkshire. Her work often delves into the intricacies of the British Asian diaspora. She was shortlisted for the Yorkshire Asian Young Achievers Award in the Arts and Creative Industries category in 2023, and she placed third in the 2024 Roundhouse Slam, where she also won the audience vote. She has been a guest on BBC Women's Hour, and her work has been featured in anthologies and online, and she's here with me on this wonderful Zoom call. Zara, what a joy to have you with us. Welcome to Have a Kind Word with Yourself.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's great to have you here. I would love to know if there are any kind words that you've heard recently.
Oh, it's really hard to pinpoint a specific one. I think it's just a testament to the company I've had around me. But I think the more simple the better in terms of just acknowledgement and a heartfelt thank you. I think that matters more than any decorated statement. But I think more so the sentiment that comes behind the words. Can't pinpoint a specific one.
I love that actually, that there's such an array, that there are so many around you. And sometimes simplicity does stand out in all of that, doesn't it?
Yeah, definitely. I think it's always about the company around you and who you surround yourself with, and I think that's always a reflection of yourself. With the amount of time I've been spending with my friends lately and diving into conversations, there's a lot of introspection and reflection on all of our parts, and I think the kind words have been attributed to personality traits and growth. And so I think at the minute that's what's struck out the most, those kind of words about personality growth and development. So maybe growth development, I would say.
I love that. Long may that continue for you to have around you those who hold up those lovely reflections and say kind things. That's awesome.
Thank you very much.
I also love, towards the beginning of my chats, to ask my guest about when our paths first crossed. So we have seen each other at poetry events around Yorkshire and beyond. I remember we bumped into each other at Uni Slam in Birmingham a few years ago,
Yeah,
and you were a guest at the night that I run in Huddersfield called Attic Stories. But do you remember our first meeting?
I do. Now that you've just briefly spoken about it, it was actually, and I'm interested in knowing if you remember, if you can recall. It was at the Small Seeds venue, the Huddersfield Literature Slam, where I first came as an audience participant with my friend, and you very kindly came up to us and asked us to judge, and we were so excited. I think that was the first instance of us ever meeting.
I very much remember that. I remember the smile on your face. I remember your enthusiasm to be a judge. And I seem to remember talking to you like later on in the slam and finding out that you did poetry. And I was like, oh, I'd love to hear your work. not knowing that you are this incredible poet. You were just phenomenal when I got to hear you. But yeah, Small Seeds was this venue in Huddersfield. It had a tree in the middle of the space, and we had the poetry slam there for the literature festival.
No, yeah, that venue, I was in awe of it. As soon as I walked in, I was like completely taken away by that. I was like, I need to visit this venue more frequently, and the event was ace from start to finish. And I remember being so inspired by your work and your craft and how you held yourself on that stage and space, not only as a poet but as a host as well and an event curator. And I'm very glad that that was our first instance of meeting. I feel like it's a very monumental and significant meeting as well, and it's also tracked. There's a pinpoint there, so I can, refer back to in terms of all of our instances of meeting because there have been. It always happens to be random in different places, but there's always an element of surprise with that, and it's nice.
Yeah, absolutely. And it is tricky when you meet a lot of people in any community, but for us it's the poetry community to sort of to remember back to that first meeting point. But it's nice when you can remember those exact points. And thank you for your kind words as well. That's really lovely to hear.
You're very welcome.
And so before we jump into the kind chat, I know that you write, you perform, you do a lot of creative work. And is there something that you love in particular about the creative work that you do?
I feel like there are so many different avenues I could explore and unpack with this, but I think the main one that stands out is the sense of community and collaboration. I think you tend to gravitate towards people that one have either spoken about and articulated something that you have never been able to put into words, and there's sort of something along the lines of sympathy and empathy that you can experience. On the back of that, what I found really significant for myself is the communications after events I've had with complete strangers that are touched by the words I've shared that evening and aren't creative. I think what I love most about the creative space is the human element. And that's something that always brings me back. And I'm very much a people person. I'm not very online, notorious for not being online. But every time I am in these creative spaces, I always look forward to and remember the most the characters and the people that I've met. And I think that fills my cup the most. And that's something that I always reflect on and draw from.
Oh yeah, I completely relate to that for sure. That in-person conversation you might have with someone after an open mic or a performance that just feels really yeah, there's a connection there. I don't know if you get this, but sometimes people will come up and if they've seen you perform, there's this sense of like you've been on stage behind a microphone and I've been in the audience, and it almost feels like there's this imbalance of status or power or something, and people can feel quite nervous coming up. I get this if they might feel quite nervous coming up to me to say something, and I'm immediately like, "Oh, tell me your name. Thank you for being. What's brought you here tonight?" And I just want to chat. Um, and it's nice having those connections.
Definitely. Like I think that's what enjoy so much about it. I think when you're behind the stage, obviously there's an element, not necessarily a persona, but it's rehearsed work. And so there will be, confidence coming through, and um I always try not to do an intro because I'd like to go straight into the works because I'm protected behind it. I'm guarded behind it. It's stuff I've written in secret. I'm so confident about, well, not confident about the words that I've written, but the whole reason I started writing poetry was to avoid saying what I actually wanted to say. And so I think that element of that power imbalance or status as you referred to it does come through. But I think having been on the other side and wanting to go up and having those human conversations are what the whole event's about. Um, and like you said, getting to know people's names and asking them what they do, and sort of their backstory and what brings them there that night. You'll always find a nugget of information that will stick with you. I'm sure you'll probably picture a few faces. As I'm saying this, I am picturing a few as well. But yeah, I genuinely enjoy those after stage moments, I guess.
Definitely. Yeah. And I have to say too, as a bit of a caveat, so I talk about how I find people nervous coming up to me if I've been performing. When I'm on the other side, if I've seen somebody perform and I want to go and speak to them, honestly, I turn into a pile of wet leaves. Like I don't know how to make words with my mouth sometimes. I remember meeting the incredible Shane Koizan a few times and would always just lose the ability to be a human. And I would just not be able to speak and I'd go really red because I was so in awe of his poetry work. And so I hope I get to cross paths with him again at some point and just be like, I am a normal person. Or
I
or
feel like I've had
I
to say that a few times as well.
yeah, exactly. Not even a normal person, but I'm capable of making words from my mouth. But yeah.
Yeah, no, definitely.
Oh, I love that. So, jumping into our kind chat, then, I use the word kind as a frame for our discussion because the notion of kindness can be quite vast. And so I thought, well, let's try an acrostic poem. And that is basically where you use each letter in a word for a line or a word. So we have a word for the letter K, which is kitchen. So, Zara, I'd love to know what's in your kindness kitchen. So, how do you cook up or create kindness for yourself?
How do I cook up kindness for myself? I think something that stuck with me from one of the poetry events I went to a few years ago, and I said this to her very recently, is from an amazing poet, human, event coordinator, curator, Faye, um, who ran, I think she still runs Cloth and Gold, doesn't she? And
Yeah.
before she performed one of her poems, and this was going back a few years, she said she schedules in time for rest. And that stuck with me and it's made its way into one of my poems. And I always um, preface the poem with that and, give a little shout out. For me in my kitchen, I have to schedule in time for rest. Um, Something that's also going on in there is, I think, my network of people, my friends, my family, even if it's strangers, I think I draw on and rely on a lot of them for support. And I think that just helps keep me full, mind the pun. But I think that's what I enjoy the most. So I think, yeah, just people really.
Yeah. The food metaphor gets used so much in these conversations. So pun appreciated for sure. I love that about Faye's comment really staying with you. And I think in the times that I've seen you perform and when you do talk a little bit about your community or where you have created work from, you speak with such fondness about those in your kind of close-knit circle. And it sounds like you have a real appreciation for those that are around you.
Definitely. I think there's a massive part people play in your life in terms of shaping who you are. I think drawing on the last few years, particularly this year, I've had the immense luxury of not only realizing but recognizing the value of the people around me and how much of a role they played in my life, but equally the changes they've witnessed in my character and the versions of me that I am becoming as I'm getting older. We joke and say, we're 25 now, so our prefrontal lobes developed, and maybe that's got a part to play. But I think like I don't take that lightly having a few best friends from that have known me from my childhood that live in close proximity, but equally knowing, making new friends and valuing their insight because if you know me, I can talk for England. And Pakistan, put that in there too, but I can talk a lot and it's knowing when to listen, when to pour out and when more than one perspective is appreciated. And I think what the people in my life have is a real sense of community, which is also, reflected within the poetry scene as well. And I'm truly grateful for that because a lot of what growing up in um, a working class area is relying on community. And a lot of
Yeah.
what being Pakistani and also being British to me, it is being Pakistani. And I think I've valued those aspects of my life growing up. And you truly realize the extent to which they hold not only power, but it provides a safety net for you in your adulthood. And and I genuinely appreciate the people in my life. Like I truly do. And um, I think everyone serves a purpose, and that purpose manifests into whatever it needs to be during that time. And a lot of conversations I had, sometimes a lot about something and a lot about nothing. And I think you've got to have a balance and experience like an equilibrium. And I think that's where it is. I very much am a people's person, and my parents saw that too, and I might get it from them. So
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. Just having that sense of community and I love the idea of talking about everything and nothing too. I think when you can be sort of your full self with friends or with your community so that you can say all of the things or just be in silence together, like that's there's so much value. Although from what you're saying, there's maybe not a lot of silence, but that's okay too.
there is some silence. I was laughing because one of my best friends and also poet Amina Khan, which you know about, has
Wonderful, Amina.
recently, yeah, she's recently been helping me a lot with my studies and everything that I've been doing, but in every regard anyway. And I think it just gets to a point in the middle of the night because we prefer working and being productive throughout the night, and that's when most of my poetry comes from as well. Um, it'll get to a point where it'll get to about 4 a.m. in the morning, and neither one of us wants to be here doing, um, well, me getting to do my work. And we'll just put on, I'll start playing this one song, and we just have like a little moment where we're transcending, we call it. And that'll be the silent moment, but we're just operating on routine every day that happens. And so uh, when there is silence, there are a lot of gestures going on in the background and a lot of untold stories within that. And so I think it's going back to what you said about that authenticity and what that looks like in friendships, because I initially explored authenticity in hybridity for my one of my creative projects was I was doing my undergraduate degree at Leeds Beckett University, and I was just thinking about authenticity within friends, and not having to be a certain version of yourself, but your friends knowing those versions of you that exist. And so it's easy to code switch, but with your personalities, I guess. And that's where
Yeah.
it's
Yeah. Oh, yeah, absolutely. And I think it's understanding that about yourself because I'm thinking back to what you were just saying before about when you're performing, there's a bit of code switching happening there because, I mean, certainly for myself, there's no way I'm that articulate and confident on as I am on stage because it's rehearsed, like you say.
yeah.
And so coming off stage, you are yourself, but a different version, and you're like that with different friends and community members and people who kind of cross your path. But when there's that shorthand, when there are those that just, even with like a glance of your eyes or something, they just get it. That's always really nice. Moving on to the next letter in the word kind, the letter is I, and the word I have for that is inspiration. And I'd love to know where you find inspiration.
I feel like I touched on it slightly with the last one. I think first and foremost, it's I've probably got to say my grandma. She was an absolute powerhouse of a woman, and she embodied everything that makes me me, but equally what I am not at the same time, in the sense that she was this strong woman, who, has a massive family, and she was a matriarch. And I had the privilege of sharing a room with her up until she passed when I was 14 years old, so 11 years, almost 11 years ago. And I used to ask her stories and everything like that. And she had this bright red hair because of all the henna she used to put on. And she had her routines with her praying in the morning. And, she'd wake me up for school and I'd tell her not to. And I'd ask her stories about what it was like because she was a pre-war baby. And what it was like in Pakistan, and then when she, came over here eventually, and what that was like for her. She was a strong Muslim woman. Had elements of um culture coming through. We used to watch EastEnders and there was dot cotton in there. And we'd be like, in Punjabi, we say to her, that's you. And she used to always talk about dot cotton. And we used to have a laugh and a joke. I think definitely my grandma. I think she embodies everything that I would absolutely like, love to be a fraction of. Um, I think that echoes what you said it in the bio, which is at the forefront of what I feel like my work is about: British Asian diaspora and being Muslim, and navigating those experiences in what it means to be brought up in Halifax, born and bred in Halifax, and what that looks like. Um, my family, of course, the postcode that I live in, um, being, Pakistani and having had the luxury of being able to visit and go there a few times. Um, and equally, it'd be remiss to not say strangers. All these encounters that I've had, um, in whatever street it is or whatever country it's been in on my travels. You know how we were talking about like talking to people after a poetry event at the end of the night. It sort of reminded me of how my parents would stop in a supermarket and talk to someone that they've just seen for hours on end and they never got in. I just wanted to run away, but I found myself guilty of doing the same thing. But it is those experiences, but I feel like sometimes it's just the mundanity of everyday life and maybe the calm and chaos of what ensues in your mind. And I think sometimes it could completely be random. I feel like a thought just pops in and it's like, okay, let me write about this now. But I think it's always got to be people. I think without the people in my life, I would probably have very little to say.
Hmm. I'm getting such a sense of connection that keeps coming up in our chat, Zara, and that's really beautiful. I also love hearing you speak about your grandma. I know I heard you speak about her in a poetry performance not that long ago, and what a gift to have been able to share a room with her. And I'm sorry that she passed, but it sounds like you had really treasured time with her.
It's interesting because I think about it now, and I think I just about started writing before she passed. And I think, what would she think now if she knew what I were doing and if she saw me? Because when I were really young, so I'm like the second youngest grandkid, on my dad's side of the family, and
Yeah.
so all my cousins are a lot older than me. They're in like their 40s, and they got kids older than me, or like some of their kids are my age, and so. I was slightly envious of, being one of the youngest grandkids because that meant I got the least amount of time with my grandma. But
Right.
within the same breath, like I equally, got to share a room with her, which not many of them did. Um, and she she wanted me in her room because my sister used to kick in her sleep. So she was like, give me the other one, not her. And so I love that because, I had raging insomnia and my grandma would be up late at night. She'd been patting the bed to see where I've got to, and I'd be patting it to see if she's still breathing. So um, yeah, I remember one time when I think I was in about year three, so I must have been 8 years old, and I'd made it onto the girls' football team, and they were way older than me. And just down the road from where I live, there's a field, and I had a football game. And I remember my mum and my grandma came down to watch it,
Mm.
and she sat down and my mum was like, "Do you know which one she is?" And she was like, "Yeah, the one with the bright pink bubble." And my grandma, having absolutely no understanding what football is, came, sat and watched me play a game, and I scored a goal and I was chuffed to bits. And
Ah.
I think if I just wonder what would she do knowing or hearing what I write about. So it's bittersweet, but I think it's just sort of like food for thought. Because I do write a lot about her, but equally it took a lot of time to write and for it to pour out the way that it did. I wish everyone could have met her. A lot of people, knew her. I don't think there's a person locally to me that doesn't know who she is. Um, but yeah, she's an absolute powerhouse of a woman. Yeah.
Well, and what a beautiful thing to keep her alive in your writing and through story and through those around you that knew her. That's absolutely gorgeous. So the next letter in our word is N, and the word I have is noticing. And you seem like someone who notices a lot from what you're saying about like a thought coming into your head or having a conversation with someone or being around people and noticing different kind of connections and things. However, I'm curious about kindness in particular. So I'd love to know what you're noticing about kindness these days.
What I'm noticing about kindness these days is that it's simple. You don't need to overthink it. It's being thoughtful and just being thoughtful in terms of how you are with your words and being considerate. It doesn't take much to be kind, is how I view it. And like very recently my friends did something really nice to me for me, which they shouldn't have had to, done. And I said, like, I would have been content with just going out for a day and being within the company and presence, because I think time is hard to get hold of people, and that's one of the most valuable. And um time is luxury, and that's all I ask for. If we are to hang out, but I think being open and honest with your words is probably the kindest thing you can do before you say anything, and even a smile is kind. And I think I draw on that a lot from religion as well, because smiling is so not, it's a good thing. And so I think it's easier to be kind than it is to be nasty. And why would anyone choose to be nasty? Do you know what I mean?
I've been nodding so much in what you've been saying because I love that, the simplicity of it, that kindness can be really simple. That I think is one of those phrases or thoughts that can stop you in your tracks and go, oh, yeah, it doesn't have to be this whole built up, overthought thing. It can be a smile, it can be a kind word. And yeah, yeah, what you say about it being easier to be kind than to be cruel, I mostly agree with that. Sometimes it feels like kindness is it takes energy and intention, which is worth doing, but sometimes it does need that like, okay, I'm gonna dig deep and see the good in this situation or be clear and honest in what I'm saying. But I think if we thought about kindness as being simple more, maybe it wouldn't feel like hard work in those moments.
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. I think it is. I think sometimes it's easier to just fall into, like, why should I have to be kind, when you're often sometimes, like, people are, argue you're not faced with it. And I think what I've been subconsciously doing but consciously thinking about is having a cup half full, and being grateful. And I think that helps shift my perspective massively, because I could either go about my day being stressed, um, or, just take a breath and step back and be like, it can be all right. And I think it specifically probably has developed from working in various different jobs from when I was younger. And I was speaking about this today to some people whilst I was at work, that when I worked as a waitress, when you work in an industry, you notice a lot, and you're more considerate and thoughtful of how it is to be the customer to the waiter and waitress. And I was saying to him, my sisters never used to tip waiters and waitresses. I mean, there's a whole debate on typical culture, but I'm one of those that do tip. Um, and my sisters never used to tip before they ever went out. And after, I used to share my stories with them, they thought about it differently, and they would start tipping people. We went out to eat the other day in a restaurant, and I was, just putting everything away and, saying please and thank you. And it is, manners are basic, and the lady were really appreciative. But I think, having worked in retail and fast food industry, you notice a lot more, and you notice how you're meeting multiple different people within a day, and that one person doesn't realize they can actually derail your whole day. And so sometimes I used to sit there and I think, okay, I'm gonna just try and compliment as many people as I can, and I don't know how much it's gonna mean to them, but I'm gonna do it, being nice for the sake of being nice. And, like, people genuinely appreciate it, and likewise, being on the receiving end of that, it's nice to hear nice things. um and I don't think, like, it needs an extensive repertoire of vocabulary to sort of do that justice, because I've been there where it's like, okay, like, I just want to pack everything in and, not be this amazing person, and then you have these little moments in your day where you're reminded of what being kind is. um and, like, I had one the other day where I went to last week. I was at a youth club, and me and Amna were doing some boxing, and these little girls came running around us, and they were like, can we get in? Can we do it? Can we do it? And I was just out and about yesterday, and one of the little girls saw me, and she was smiling. She was like, hi, and I was like, I recognized her, and I was like, what are you doing about
Ah,
yeah. And it's the unspoken within the spoken.
yeah,
But I think it's always just trying to, be cup half full and perspective, really.
I love that. The unspoken within the spoken. Spoken like a true poet for sure. That just that sense of a kind word bringing peace and bringing like the ripple effect of it versus the ripple effect of a negative word or of being cruel or mean, even in just a short interaction, that's going to
Yeah.
affect someone for their day, for their week, that might really stir in their mind and, keep them
Yeah.
up at night or whatever.
Yeah. Equally, like I've been on the receiving end of it where it has happened, and I think, leaning or learning rather from that experience is not nice. I'm not trying to be so optimistic that I don't know what, cynicism is or being pessimistic. Equally, I've been there, and it's a process, and it's training. Well, learning to train your mind and your own thought process on how to make it a healthier place for you, and by reflection and extension on how that looks for other people around you and your
Yeah.
network. And
Yeah.
we sort of want to pour into everyone's garden. Like, there are times when it's going to be tough. And I think it's having that process in place where, for me, I look at facts and then feelings and learn to process it in a way that works for me. But it's also talking myself through my own thoughts and getting to that end point where, okay, like, I'm at a sound conclusion where I can navigate it going forward. It's not by any means easy, but it can become easier, and I think that's what I'm looking to do for not just me, my mates around me. Should they want it? Sometimes they don't want it, and that's fine.
Mhm.
Um, but yeah.
Yeah, there's some real choice and intention behind there, Zara. That's really beautiful. I love that idea of challenging yourself to as many ways as you can compliment people. That's really beautiful. We're nearly at the end of our word, but I wanted to ask you briefly about you appeared on BBC Women's Hour. Uh,
Mhm.
was it a couple of years ago now?
Yeah, about 2 years ago.
Yeah, and can you talk a little bit about what led to that and what that experience was like for you?
Yeah. So whenever I talk about ending up on Woman's Hour, I mean it was an insane opportunity, and I'm extremely grateful for the ripple effect it's had. But I always draw it back to Roundhouse, because
Yeah.
without having been on Roundhouse Slam, it wouldn't have happened, and it goes back even further than that because it goes back to the community of people within Leeds, the Leeds poetry scene that I
Yeah.
have always adored, looked up to, and always been inspired from because I studied at Leeds Beckett University, and so that's when I first encountered the poetry open mic scene. Um, it was it was Matt Abbott who sent me the form, and he was like, "You should apply." And then there were like Bryony, who I went to uni with, and a few of the people who were sending it to me as well. And at that time, I was like, "Oh no, I don't want to go for it." And there's a lot of battling with imposter syndrome.
Mm.
Long story short, I ended up applying for it. I was like, I've got the experience to gain and nothing to lose, and what more could I ask for than that? So went for it. Ended up on Roundhouse Slam. Some miracle getting on there. I'd always looked up to that as well, watching poets like Suhaima Manzoor-Khan, Ruqayya Fatuga, Toby Campion, Vanessa Kasula, like, all these people I'd just been watching on YouTube and drew up like had the utmost respect for their craft and their words. Um and anyway, ended up being at Roundhouse.
Can I jump
And
in for a second? So,
yeah,
Roundhouse, can you just explain a little bit for anyone who doesn't know what is unique about the Roundhouse Slam?
the Roundhouse Poetry Slam is a well, it's a national poetry slam competition, and slam is a competitive style of poetry where you are marked out of 10 for your performance and out of 10 for your writing, and they get very nitty-gritty down to the decimal points.
Yeah.
Um, and it's based on a lot of wordplay. And so everyone had attended a heat in various different locations. I know there was some in Liverpool, Leeds, London, and I was in the Leeds heat, and I'd made it through to the final, and I performed two poems. One was Dad's Taxi, about my dad being a taxi driver and my experiences surrounding that growing up. And then the other poem was about honor killings and abuse. Um, and so when I did perform it, I'd heard that well, Anita Rani came up and spoke to me after the event, and shortly after, I'd had communications from people at BBC, and how they said they'd like to get me onto Woman's Hour. Natasha Ratu, who's the chief exec of Carmen Ivana, was also a guest that day.
Mm.
And so we connected, and we spoke about the work that Carmen Nirvana does, who are a charity supporting honor-based abuse and violence. and sort of networked with them from there, because I'd initially heard about Carmen Ivan and the work they do and have been doing when I was about 13 years old in school. I think it was like one lesson that was covered about it, and it stuck out to me massively because at that time I think there was an element of naivety and ignorance. I didn't really understand experiences outside of my own and the community,
Mm.
and sort of didn't want to look there and didn't want to acknowledge that, okay, this is an issue that does happen on a base abuse and violence. And so there was a lot of food for thought over the years. And I think after seeing a lot of the cases online, I think there was one I came across on YouTube about Sumaya Begum, who lived in Bradford and studied at Leeds Beckett as well.
Hmm.
And sadly, she was a victim of honour-based abuse. One case that spread quite widely on social media was Fawzia Javid, and the Channel 4 documentary, the Push. That was broadcasted everywhere, and that got a lot of people talking. My sisters were talking about that quite a bit, and my cousins, everyone was speaking about it and how devastating it was.
Mm.
Um, but very recently, I think were it last Monday, they were celebrating an event which I was absolutely thrilled to be a part of, where they've now reached a statutory definition for honour-based abuse and violence, and we celebrated in London, which it's big news, and there were survivors there speaking about their stories, and a lot of organizations that have been set up outside of that. But I think that one experience, I think what I didn't realize is that when I initially started writing poetry on these scraps of paper I used to share with Amina in school and my other mates,
Yeah.
would transform into something that impacts people every day. And I think as I was, stood there in the House of Lords and thinking about the last few years that have led me there, because around 2 years ago, around this time, I was, on Women's Hour, and just before that, Roundhouse, and I've been able to go to all these events that I do need to at some point post online because I don't do any of that. But equally, it's not just about posting it, but about solidifying the importance of these events, whether it's cultural or material or anything in that regard, because
Mm.
I think what it reminded me of is not just the like groundbreaking work that these organizations are doing, but also the impact of poetry and the arts, and how you can highlight and signify a message in a way that isn't arbitrary and is accessible. And I think that's what I like about slam, and it's just been an absolute like insightful journey from that. I feel like I digressed a lot there, but
Well, it is a journey, absolutely. I think that is the word for it. And I really love how from the question you were like, I have to go back and then I have to go back further, that it wasn't just something that arose on its own. It came through a lot of things, and mentioning the people along the way, the Leeds poetry scene, the amazing Matt Abbott, the people along the way who have been cheering you on and that kind of thing, or connecting with you saying, I want to know more about your work, let's talk about it. And that journey sounds like it is continuing, and that's really, really exciting. Thank you so much for talking about that. The final letter in the word kind is D, and the word I have is dream. And I'd love to know what you dream of for kindness in the future.
I think for people to practice kindness, I don't think people see it as a practice, but I think it is. And I think it also is an innate part of our being. I've got little nephews, and one's 1.5 and one's 3, and watching them, you know, get older and also develop um, physically, emotionally, mentally, intellectually, you see them exhibit behaviors that are them, are reflective of being kind and sharing, even if he doesn't want to share sometimes. But it's an innate part of us, and somewhere down the line, I think it gets lost, and we hide behind a mask of how we're perceived. And I
Yeah.
think sometimes there are no strings attached to kindness. People can be good for the sake of being good, and it doesn't need to be too much. It's okay to. I also see it as good karma. Like, what you put out will come back, and but to not see it as a transactional thing, like kindness isn't transactional. And I think
Yeah.
the more you practice it, but in an authentic way, it'll come back to you. And I think the world could do with a lot of it, to be honest. And I think the people closest to you could do with it. And I think it's also remembering to say it to the people closest to you, because how often have you said to your mates or to your family, that like, actually, thank you for this, this, and that. And for me and the people around me, I think it's those specific examples, or just having that sit down moment, because sometimes it's so easy to get lost in our own heads and our own lives. But that moment, I feel like what kindness brings is an element of grounding, and I think everybody needs a bit of grounding.
Ooh, yeah. I love that idea of kindness as grounding and also kindness as a practice. It's not a fixed thing. It's something we need to do and redo and renew and all of that. And it can happen in lots of ways. I think that's a really profound insight is the idea of kindness grounding us, and then we can think about, well, what are the ways I can show kindness? What's available to me? What's around me to be able to show kindness? And suddenly you might feel like you're at some sort of kindness buffet, where there's
Yeah.
all these different ways to dip into it. But oh gosh, that's really beautiful. We are coming to a close, which is sad because you have so many wonderful ways of phrasing these things about kindness, and I've been writing them down and can't wait to put this out for people to hear. The tagline for this project is finding ways for people to keep kind, creative, and connected. And I just wondered what maybe a top tip is for doing that, for keeping kind, creative, and connected.
I think for me, and I think you can't go wrong with most people, is to find an element of humor, and also just like thoughtfulness, because it doesn't cost anything.
Yeah.
And there are multiple memes available online. And I think sometimes you need an inside joke. And me and most of my friends have an inside joke. And I think in the chaos of life and the day, sometimes the storm that has been brewed, you just need to chuck a kindness spanner in the works. And the way that I do that is by reminding my friend of a funny moment, or
Yeah.
maybe a new word that they've coined. And it always seems to work, because it's a memory we can both reflect back on, and also it just brings those emotions and feelings back, and you sort of relive it multiple different times, and it alleviates those temporary feelings. So I think a bit of humor to move away from a stressful situation.
I love that. Yeah. I mean, who doesn't love to laugh? It can be such an equalizer, can't
And then
it?
and then you've got tears of joy.
Yeah.
You have those absolutely raging, laughing moments, and you just can't stop. I think that is also I hate to use the word remedy, but I genuinely do think it is.
It
Um
completely is.
because
Absolutely.
you can do it solitary, if you're online, or if you just remember something, and or you can choose to share it. And I've never seen it not work. Put it that way. I've never seen it not work. So you know,
Yeah, definitely. I don't know if you've ever had it, but like sometimes just walking along and remembering something, I'll like
yeah.
snort laugh out loud and just go, "Oh, yeah, that made me laugh a lot."
No, definitely. I've got a whole little memory bank of those, and just drawn it from when I need to. But yeah,
I love that going to the laughter ATM.
yeah,
And it's nice remembering those times and those people you were with when you laugh so hard you cry or your belly
yeah,
aches or your cheeks hurt. Yeah. Oh, that's really great. And yeah, I think silliness and laughter is also such a nice way to build trust. If you can be silly together, then there's something really deep going on there, I think.
yeah, definitely. I think so. I love like a little good pun in there, or if it's a memory. But yeah, ATM, I like that.
May we all have a fully stocked laughter ATM. Well, I wonder just to finish, is there anything that you would like to tell listeners about, anything coming up or anything you'd like to plug?
Just probably my socials. I'll try and get better at posting online. No promises. I'm notorious procrastinator, but may this be about change. My poetry Instagram account is spoken by Sehar. That's Sehar being Sehar, and just follow my journey from there if you'd like to, and if not, that's fine.
Well, I hope that our journey brings us together in person again at some point. But thank
I
you
hope
for
so.
this. Yeah, thank you for this discussion journey. This has been an absolute joy. And I think a lot of what you've said is going to really ripple through my mind over the next while. So, yeah, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, a couple of episodes ago, you might remember that in my opening blurb, where I suggest a little micro activity for kindness for yourself, I asked about who or what makes you laugh a lot. And so it feels like amazing serendipity for laughter to come up again in my wonderful chat with Zara. I have to say, after we stopped recording, we were on Zoom for a bit still, and Zara's friend, Amina, who she mentioned in our chat, popped on the Zoom to say a quick hi. And I found out that Zara had been at Amina's house while we were recording. And as soon as Amina came on Zoom, she and Zara were just laughing their heads off. It was this joyful example of what Zara had spoken about, surrounding herself with people who lift her and fill up her memory bank of good laughs. What a gift to have had such a full and deep conversation about poetry, kindness, and some tough topics, and then to finish with laughter. Huge thanks to you, Zara. And huge thanks to you, dear listener. We'll have another episode coming your way soon. You can like and subscribe on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Podbean, and YouTube, where captions are available. Have a Kind Word with Yourself, the podcast, is written, hosted, and produced by me, Rose Kondo. If you want to find out more about me and my work, you can drop me a line through my website, rosekondo.net, where you can also see gorgeous illustrations by artist Neve Wood, also known as Little Badger. Our beautiful music has been composed and recorded by Eleonora Rosca. And finally, please share this. Help us to keep kind, creative, and connected.